Today's guest is Ian Peterman. He's the CEO of Peterman Design Firm. Ian, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, perfect. So, um, I mean, I understand your background. So, product design. Um, how did you get into it? Did you always want to be in product design?
Oh, yeah, I'm actually one of those people that when I was a kid, I used to design stuff and come up with inventions, and um, I loved it. I had an experience. I came up with a in-wheel motor design, and Siemens released it like 3 or 4 years after I had come up with it and shown my dad, and so that kind of cemented. All right, I can actually think of things. I know I have ideas, and that just grew. I got into an internship when I was 16 doing CAD work and design at a laser company, and that was kind of the last piece to seal the deal. I loved doing it. It was fun. So from there, it just my I grew my career.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's back in the day, we had a company that launched products, and we did have a product designer in house as well. So I do understand the process. In getting your firm up and running, I mean, I guess you worked at companies first, and then you started your firm. What was the idea around going off on yourself by yourself?
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely my first good section of my career was working for other companies, but I actually started um, my career started before 2008, and then when that crash happened, I got into freelancing as a way to subsidize the the off and on work during that time a lot of us experienced. So that got me into, and I just kept doing that. So I kind of always had a side gig working on some side projects and consulting and stuff like that. And then it turned into I sat at the desk. I was in cubicles working on the same kind of product for years at a time. I spent time at HP. There's only so much you can do with a printer. There's actually a lot, but it gets a little bit boring for me. And so that's when I decided, okay, well, I'm having fun with the contracting stuff. Why don't I just expand from there? And so I actually started a design firm with a few partners first, as kind of dipping my toe first in that realm, and got a lot of experience and learned quite a bit. And then we broke up that company. People didn't want to do it anymore. Went off, and everybody kind of went off and did their own thing. And then I worked for a company for a little bit and decided that I needed to run in a firm again and get back into contracting, because there's just so much you can do, and being able to work on different projects and different fields. I really enjoy that. So that's what led me to it, and is keeping me here.
Yeah, I noticed that you have sort of a focus on conscious design and sustainability. Tell me how that sort of intertwines with your product development work.
Yeah, so it's always been something that I've had in my mind. I grew up, my parents were very eco-friendly, recycling was important, things like that. And so it was kind of just a background component. And then as I progressed, and as my firm grew, I just got to the point where basically I just decided, well, there's no reason to not create anything that isn't sustainable. There's why is that even an option still? And so that just led me to pivot, and I was asked the question, what makes what you do different? What's special about what's your process? And I hadn't really thought about it, and that's where I came up with conscious design of, okay, well, when I do think about those things, I do think about sustainability, but I just hadn't put it down in a way where I could actually, show someone what my process was. And so that's what kind of led to me creating conscious design as a concept of, all right, let's design products, and let's only do them if we're going to be able to be sustainable and think about all the different impacts that a product can have, because I've worked in pretty much the entire range of it. I've built stuff. I've worked in actually building products on a floor. I've done the design, I've done supply chain, and there's just so much to it. And so that's where that pivot of just realizing there's not really anybody else better to do it than the designer who's actually, managing that process. There's, so that just turned into, oh, all right, this is direction I need to go in. More of us should be doing it, and there's no reason I should just start right now. And so that's how we got here.
Mhm. Got it. Now, I guess the question is, what sort of things do you evaluate before you decide to take it a step further? Because obviously, you only do a lot of work and realize that there's aspects of it that don't qualify. How do you think about that? Because there's a lot of components there.
Right. Well, the way I when I'm talking to a new prospective client that says, "Oh, I want to work on something," the evaluation really is making sure that they're on board with this approach. And I'm very open. I'm like, this is the approach we're going to look at, the sustainability of it. We're going to ask the hard questions about what happens to your product when it's dead and is end of life as it arrived. What are we going to do about that? And as long as everyone's good with that conversation, then and we agree that that is the way to move forward, then we move forward. And the way that we work through that is typically a discovery process, and that is where we ask those questions. We start diving into the life cycle of a product, which I think is a huge question that isn't asked a lot of times in the design process. It's more of, oh, well, you want to design that? Cool, we'll go design that, and not really thinking about that. And so that's one of the really big components is end of life, cradle, things like that. And that's where if it's all in alignment there, then we're good to go through the process.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. So, what are there any challenges taking this approach opposed to just kind of, product market fit or whatever else things like what sort of unexpected things occur when you take this approach?
Yeah, so I'll kind of break that. The unexpected piece is usually that once you start down this path and you really do create a more conscious, sustainable product, that there's a lot of fear around, oh, well, it's going to be too expensive. It's going to not be possible, or, just not awareness. And so there's this kind of education and awareness arc that happens where you start introducing, we go, okay, well, here are materials that we can use. And no, they're not four times more expensive. They're actually pretty reasonable. And people are willing to pay if there is a little bit of an increase in cost, they're actually willing to do that. And so there's that is kind of the surprise that happens, is being able to show people and have them realize, oh yeah, this is more possible than I thought it was, because it's 10 years ago we didn't have as many material options, but now there's so many coming out. And that's so there's that. And then the challenges are, there still are materials that we just can't replace with a environmentally friendly option. There's some use cases still where there's not a green way to do it. So the focus then becomes on, well, what else can we do around, if we have to use that plastic material or whatever it is, or we have to use something else, what can we do around it? How do we make the supply chain shorter? How do we not ship it 1,000 times before it goes to the customer, and things like that? And we look at it in this more holistic business and product
Mhm.
whole system, because it is such an intertwined and connected system. And so we'll find ways. So how do we offset if we have to use something that we maybe didn't want to, ideally? And so that's usually the challenge. It's just some of those areas we don't have that material yet, we don't have a process yet. And some people are willing to take it on, right? So some companies are like, cool, well, how about we invent a material that that will replace it? I'm like, well, that's a whole nother journey, but sure, we can dive down that road. But that's usually very expensive. So that's kind of a stopping point typically. Nobody wants to invent a new material every time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how much of your job is, sort of bringing people down to earth with certain things?
That is definitely a good portion of it. I'd say maybe 30%. Um,
And how
there
do you do
are
that? How do you and what are the things where the clients are like, sort of unrealistic for some one lack of a better word, and how do you sort of educate?
Yeah, so one of them is, you know, typically a lot of people think that it takes less time. So there's a especially to now, we're still dealing with supply chain issues from COVID. That ripple hasn't stopped hitting everyone. So there's a time gap between what they expect and what is actually possible because they see, Apple comes out with a new phone every 12 months, but they don't realize that they actually started on it 18 to 24 months before, before you see it. And
And that's the best
so,
in the world, right? That's the best
right.
in the world.
Exactly. And that's they're going fast, right? And that industry is moving at quite a clip. So really helping those expectations, guiding those on what does it actually take time wise in order to develop a product. And if you're going to do it in a sustainable way, you want to do it in this conscious way, it will take a little bit longer time because you're going to ask questions that nobody else is asking. And so really kind of helping those helping clients figure out those expectations and showing them, okay, well, this is all possible. um, but most of the time it's not for a lack of innovation. They Most of the time it's I don't have to curb their uh, what they can achieve with what they're having, as an idea, because there's so many materials and processes out there now. That used to be what I'd have to do, is say, no, we can't actually do that. There isn't a biodegradable version of that in existence. But now we have so many options. So yeah, and that's it.
How do you keep up with all the different materials, and what sort of track record do you need to see to feel comfortable using maybe a newer offering?
So that really is just typically a conversation between the client and us. And here's, if it's something that, maybe there is just a brand new material and there are no existing ones. The only one that exists is only a few months old. Then it becomes a conversation of, well, what is your risk as the company? What kind of risk are you willing to take on a material? And then sometimes just navigating, well, how do we build a relationship with the company that's just released this material? How do we maybe partner with them in order to test it out? So really, I would say I don't have a personal risk number where I go, oh, I won't touch it, because there's so many new materials getting developed. It's really looking at it from a development time. Do we have the time to have that material, make some components out of it, test it to our own requirements, whatever the business requirements are? Or do we not have the time, do we not have the resources to play with something that's experimental in some way? And that's, it varies based on business to business what's going to be good. And some companies are, they go, okay, well, we don't, let's do it. If it fails, then we'll go back, but let's try it to start. And some are more they want to see it out in use for a few years before they'll consider it a viable material. And as far as keeping on top of them, that is a lot of work. We do a lot of material research, and because we work with so many different clients in different spaces, it's just kind of part of our process and part of our job, is that we are always doing material research and talking to new companies, asking what their new materials are. And so it's really an ongoing process. I wouldn't say that we know all of them, because we're always finding new ones, but it's definitely a large component of what we do is finding those materials as as we need them too.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I noticed that you help assist with the product launch. When a client comes to you, do you look at just their first couple of steps to create items or low run stuff, or do you try to assess their total budget in terms of product development and launching? Like how what sort of scope do you look at things? Do you look at things from the first couple of steps, or do you look at it more holistically just to understand how they're going to approach things?
We take a holistic approach because without like you mentioned, short run, that's one conversation. Large run, long run, that is a whole different conversation that sometimes requires different vendors. It's a whole different supply chain in some cases to be able to do, if you're scaling from 1,000 units to 100,000
Yeah,
per year, that manufacturer may not be able to handle it. So you may need to be working with different ones. So we try to, when we do a discovery process, we want to look at the next couple of years, ideally up to 5 years of, well, here's your product, here's where you want to go, here's what is your marketing budget, what is your marketing going to be on this, what are the price points that you need to be at, what does the market care about, what are similar products out there, and looking at really that whole journey to get to the point where where do you want to be, basically, is the leading question, and then there's a whole bunch of follow-ups after that of really pulling together what that's going to look like, because I think it's a little bit, it is too short-sighted to just focus on the first couple steps, because it is a long journey if you want to scale, and if you want to be a seven-figure product, it's going to take you more than a couple steps to get there.
sure. And I know you mentioned about, costing more and people willing to pay more, and I've read lots of studies on it. Um, what how in your experience, how much more are they willing to pay? Or at least examples. And and are there situations that you've personally encountered where they weren't able to or weren't willing to pay more?
Yeah, so typically what we've seen is somewhere between 10 and 20% more, on average. If you're like averaged out everything out there, that's about what people are willing to put into it. That said, there are certain categories. So disposable items, medical items, and more commercial items. If you're doing a one-to-one, change. If you have a disposable item, but now you have a more sustainable but still single-use disposable item, and your cost is up, that becomes harder because people use so many of them. So they're thinking, well, I'm going to use hundreds of these. This is going to add up pretty quickly. And then I would say the medical field and more commercial use is still pretty price sensitive, so those can be a harder sell. But at the same time, there's growing numbers of businesses who are specifically, they're pricing themselves and they're building the price structure in to what they're then charging to their customers to handle it. So it really depends on the focus of the brand and the business, but B2B is still a bit stiff in competition if for pricing.
Yes, that's been our experience for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So, what's been a favorite project that you worked on?
Oh, um, I loved working on lasers early in my career. That was quite fun because we did quite a few projects. We worked on some military ones. We worked on some medical lasers, and then I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I worked with a company called Saber Forge and helped them turn their lightsaber line into a full production process, and so that was a lot of fun to work on, being able to design lightsabers as a job.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. I've gotta play with them, gotta use them, did some There were some photo shoots that got done with them that we gotta have all the equipment with, and it was quite a bit of fun to work on. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are ones that I can. There's others that are in development, but I can't share them yet. I have to wait,
Sure.
have to wait till they go live. But
Absolutely.
but we have some really exciting ones that we're working on right now that are more in the sustainable field, and that's what I'm really excited about now, and we'll hopefully launching in the next few months. So when that goes
Great.
live, that'll be something you can find on our website when it goes live.
Yeah, perfect. So I know you have a podcast, and in the
Mhm.
process of interviewing various guests, you learn a lot of things. What have been some really good key learnings that you went in not knowing and coming out with a completely new idea or perspective?
Yeah, one of the ones that comes to mind that was pretty recent is I was talking to a data scientist for environmental data, and he was just sharing how much data there is that we have on environmental impact and what they can do with it in identifying potential risk areas, supply chain impacts due to not only global warming but other phenomena, other weather issues and things like that. And so that was pretty eye opening to realize just how much data. So that basically we've been collecting data for 50 years, but nobody's done anything with it. Nobody's known how to show it and apply it to businesses. And so that's something that they're doing. So that was pretty awesome. And then another interesting piece, I was talking to uh, startup Sphere. They are helping people get 401ks that are divested of all oil companies. And something that she shared on there was that they they did a study on the S&P 500 with and without oil companies, and it did the same, or if not better, without the oil companies on that. And so that was something, because a lot of people are afraid, well, if it's profitable, right? Oil makes lots of money, so if I don't have those in my portfolio, will I be harmed? And the answer is no, you actually won't be, and you'll do better long term, because there's actually a huge amount of companies and in private investment groups that are pulling their funds because it's too risky now, is what they've identified. So that was an interesting, didn't know that before. So yeah, and I think I learn a few things every time I have an interview. It's amazing. I enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Is there anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
No, this has been great. I, it's been fun chatting.
Right. Well, I share the passion for sustainability and doing the right thing. So I'm looking forward to following along in your journey.